It was exactly what I needed. A perfect chance to get away from the chaos for a while and breathe some fresh air. I picked a remote spot, deep in the woods of northern Montana, an area near the mountains, where I had camped once before. No cell service, no nearby cabins, no people for miles around. Just me, my tent, and the sound of the wind moving through the pine trees. The hike in was easy enough. I got there just before sunset, set up camp beside a narrow creek, and started cooking dinner over the fire. It was one of those moments that makes everything feel worth it. The crackling flames, the cold mountain air, the smell of food drifting through the forest. Then my phone vibrated. That immediately felt wrong. There was absolutely no signal out there. I pulled the phone from my pocket and saw a text message from an unknown number. "So, how's the camping trip going?" At first, I assumed it was one of my friends messing with me somehow. I started typing, "Pause, who is this?" But before I could hit send, another message came through. "Beautiful night out here, isn't it?" My stomach tightened. I slowly looked around at the trees surrounding my campsite. Nothing. I was completely alone. Then a third message appeared. "You picked a good spot. Nice and hidden. Nobody knows you're here. Except me." My heart dropped. A cold wave ran through my entire body. I tried to think logically. Maybe someone had followed me. Maybe somebody nearby had spotted my camp earlier. But how? I came alone. I hadn't told anyone exactly where I was going. Have you ever had that feeling that someone is watching you? Not just fear, something physical. Your skin prickles. Your breathing changes. That's exactly what I felt. I wanted to believe it was just some kind of sick joke. I shoved the phone back into my pocket and tried to continue the night, but my mind wouldn't let it go. What if somebody really was out there, in the dark? I grabbed my flashlight and scanned the woods around the campsite, searching for movement between the trees. Nothing. Only silence. And the wind. I sat back down and tried reading for a while, but every few minutes I found myself checking the phone again, waiting for another message. Time passed. When I finally looked at the clock again, it was almost midnight. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Somewhere deeper in the woods. A branch snapped. Then another. Closer this time. My mouth went dry. My heartbeat was so loud, it felt like I could hear it echoing inside my chest. I gripped the flashlight tightly and aimed it into the darkness. Nothing. Then my phone vibrated again. Another text appeared. "You're not alone." I froze. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. But I needed to know. I needed to see who was out there. Then another message arrived. This time, it was a photo, and what I saw made my blood run cold. It was my tent, taken from outside. I didn't hesitate. I dove into the tent and grabbed the only thing that made me feel remotely safe, my .38 revolver. I had never fired it outside of a shooting range before, but that night I realized I might actually need it. I took a deep breath and tried to think. I couldn't just bolt into the woods. If someone was waiting out there, I'd be an easy target. So I made a decision. I stepped outside the tent, raised the revolver toward the sky, and fired 2 shots into the air. The gunshots exploded through the forest, then silence. For one long second, everything stopped. And then I heard it. Fast footsteps, crashing through the woods, running away. My plan had worked. Whoever had been watching me was leaving. But that also meant something far worse. The person had really been there the entire time, watching me. That night, I stayed awake until sunrise, with the revolver beside me. Every sound kept me on edge. Every gust of wind made my pulse spike. But nothing else happened. When daylight finally came, I stepped outside the tent and looked around the campsite. Footprints, dozens of them, circling my tent back and forth, as if whoever it was had spent hours walking around me while I slept. I packed my gear and got out of those woods as fast as I could. I never went back, and strangely enough, after that night, I never received another message. Never again, which makes me wonder sometimes, did those gunshots save my life? Or is there still someone out there deep in those woods, waiting for the next person to arrive? I learned that night that the dark can hide things we were never meant to see. I grew up camping. My dad taught me from an early age how to respect nature, how to recognize animal tracks, how to read the forest, and understand when something felt wrong. But nothing he ever taught me prepared us for what happened that night. This happened about 4 years ago at a campground near Glacier National Park. The place was usually packed during summer. Families, hikers, RVs everywhere. But that week, we were completely alone. And that was the first strange thing. The ranger at the entrance told us nobody else had checked in for the weekend. Just me and my dad. At the time, we thought it sounded amazing. An entire campground to ourselves. It felt like winning the lottery. Now I think, maybe it should have warned us. The first day was normal. We hiked the trails, fished near the river, and talked to one of the older rangers about the area. He mentioned local Native American legends tied to the mountains, stories about spirits deep in the woods, things that mimic sounds, things you should never follow. At night, we laughed it off. I mean, who actually believes those stories anymore? But the second day, something changed. The feeling came first. If you've spent enough time in isolated wilderness, you probably know exactly what I mean. That subtle shift in the atmosphere, like the forest suddenly notices you, like something's watching from between the trees. It was late afternoon when my dad suddenly stopped walking on the trail. Do you feel that? And yeah, I did. The air felt heavy. A few moments earlier, the wind had been blowing hard through the trees. Now everything was completely still. No birds, no insects. No leaves moving, nothing, just silence. A deep, unnatural silence. We tried to ignore it, made jokes about horror movies and kept walking, but deep down, something inside me was screaming. That night we sat near the fire, ate dinner, and tried to act normal. Then we heard the first sound, a massive thud somewhere in the woods like a tree falling. We both looked toward the darkness. Dad grabbed his flashlight and scanned the tree line. Nothing. A few minutes later, another thud, farther away this time, then another, and another, each one getting closer. That's when I felt a kind of fear I had never experienced before. It wasn't fear of a bear. It wasn't fear of getting lost. It was something older, more primal. It felt like whatever was out there knew we were listening, like it was testing us. And if you were there, would you go look? Or would you stay frozen by the fire, hoping it went away? We chose to wait. Of big mistake. The final thud was so close, we actually felt the ground shake beneath us. My dad immediately grabbed the hunting knife he always carried and whispered, "Get in the tent, now." So we did. Inside the tent, everything felt worse. The silence outside was so complete, I could hear my own heartbeat. Dad sat near the entrance holding the knife. I stayed inside my sleeping bag, staring at the thin mesh window. Then we heard it, not a thud, not footsteps. A humming sound. Low, deep, almost Machan, I cow, but alive. And the worst part? You could feel it, vibrating through the air. My chest tightened. My head started spinning. Dad gripped the knife harder. You hear that? I couldn't answer. I could barely breathe. Then, it spoke. I know how that sounds. I know what people say. That it was an animal. The wind. My imagination. But I swear to God, something out there tried to talk to us. It wasn't English. It wasn't any language I recognized. The sound was wrong, like hearing a human voice, imitating words it didn't understand. My entire body locked up. Dad looked completely pale. The humming kept getting louder, almost like it was inside our heads, and then we blacked out. Everything just went dark. When I woke up, the sun was already rising. Dad was lying in the middle of the tent, still holding the knife. I checked my phone. Dead battery. His too. We stepped outside, no footprints, no broken branches, but the fire we had fed was completely cold. And the strangest part, it felt like time had stopped. Dad looked at me and said something I'll never forget. We are never coming back here. And we never did. Whatever was outside that tent was not human.